The decision to let Ben fall or pull him back up in Telltale Games' The Walking Dead isn't about Ben at all. It's about the player. It's about taking the time to really think about the choices and understanding why you made one choice over another. The choice to let Ben fall in my Philosophy and Ethics series, when I first covered episode 4 of season 1, was probably one of the most controversial I've had. Most of the people that objected to it did so with the surface level argument that Ben was just a teen, barely older than a kid. He was young, scared, and acting like any kid in his situation would act. He didn't deserve his fate. But that argument doesn't really cover the whole situation. For instance, we could explore the idea that having another person in the group would be better in the long run. With a little encouragement and guidance, he could be really helpful with growing food, scavenging, pulling guard duty, and a million other tasks, lightening the burden on the others. We could also talk about how things he did impacted the group overall, especially Kenny, and how it would take a long time for him to regain the group's trust and earn their respect with everything he'd done. And those are just a couple angles to take. But I want to dive even deeper and get more into the weeds, because it isn't really just about one character and one choice. The videos I make here on the channel are about humanity in general and what makes us tick. Dropping or saving a character in a game is a decision that doesn't really have an impact on the real world. You can start another playthrough, or even reload the game just before you made the choice and make a different choice. But the thought that goes into the why of the choice can be used outside of the game to better our own lives. See, philosophy isn't about names like Socrates or Descartes. It's about learning what questions to ask and finding ways to better ourselves and the world around us. It's also about examining our beliefs and understanding why we hold those beliefs and whether those reasons warrant continued belief. To be clear, because I know there will inevitably be comments about this, I know that for a lot of people, video games are a way to relax and unwind. Coming home after a hard day at work and taking out some steam, or just relaxing in a virtual world, is very common, and there is nothing wrong with doing that. I personally unwind by taking on the role of a virtual truck driver in American Truck Simulator, crisscrossing the United States in a digital big rig, usually listening to an audiobook or a YouTube video while I drive. But I, like many others, also really enjoy getting deep into a good story-driven game. Games like The Walking Dead, Red Dead Redemption, Detroit Become Human, Firewatch, The Wolf Among Us, Life is Strange, and many others allow us to experience a virtual life in a world often, though not always, very different from our own. They put us in the shoes of various protagonists and offer choices and stories that force us to question our own morality and decide what is right and what is wrong. And asking those questions opens a door that we can use to explore who we are and what we truly believe. Looking at the decision on whether to drop Ben or save him, I didn't hesitate the first time I played to pull him back up. I couldn't fathom letting him go, despite what he'd done, because it just didn't feel right. But diving into the choice and understanding how letting him drop could be justified helped me better understand the logic behind choices in general and forced me to find better ways to justify my decisions. In a very real-world way, I started looking at the things I believed in my own life and dissecting those beliefs. Everything from religious ideas to more mundane things like how to handle difficult situations with bosses and coworkers went under the proverbial microscope, and I found myself striving for better ways to approach decision making. And that's where understanding the why of decisions in games comes in to help. When we understand what guides us to make decisions, we can make better decisions in the future. This is a process called epistemology. Epistemology is defined as the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope. The investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. Broken down even further, it's the mental toolbox that you use to separate truth and reality from fiction. A sound epistemology gets you to the truth every time, with very few errors, and tends to lean more into logical reasoning than leaps of faith. A leap of faith can lead you to the right conclusion, but sound logical reasoning will lead to the right conclusion. Let's use an example from Season 1, Episode 2 of The Walking Dead game to illustrate what I mean. When the St. John brothers show up at the motor inn, we could have faith that they are telling the truth, believing that they have a great supply of food and a safe place to stay. We could just take them at their word and have everyone go to the farm looking for a nice hot meal. Sound logical reasoning, however, would have us questioning their motives, sending a scouting party to check the place out before bringing everyone, and really investigating the place and people for any threats to the group's safety. It doesn't preclude us from going to the farm and getting food if the brothers are telling the truth, but it helps us stay safe. And sound logical reasoning is used to a point in the game, as we see the group taking some precautions, but they also seem to be willing to take the source of the food on faith, despite the apparent lack of a source of meat on the farm. We could chalk some of that up to poor judgment and the group being extremely hungry, but had they been really critical and forced the issue instead of just trusting the St. John's on faith, Mark might have made it past dinner. But it isn't just about faith versus logic, as we can look at other places and people, like Kenny and Jane for instance, and see where a more logical view might have prevented their falling out. Had Jane really thought things through, she would have realized that hiding AJ and lying to Kenny was the worst possible decision in the moment. She would have been much better off biding her time and working with Kenny to ensure the boy's safety. Had Kenny been more logically minded, he wouldn't have lost his temper and would have realized that there was some merit in returning, at least for some supplies like baby formula, to House Hardware. They could have stocked up and focused on trying to find a settlement like Wellington with some good provisions. And we can spread the concept to other games and examine the decisions made by groups like the Vanderling gang. We learn through the course of the story that the leader of the gang, Dutch, acted more rash than he needed to, leading up to and during the events of the ferry robbery that kicked off the game's main story. It's possible to pick that decision apart and figure out what went wrong and learn from it, just like it is with Kenny's attitude, Jane's poor decision making, and dropping or saving Ben. Now, I need to point out that these decisions are part of narrative-driven games, and if the characters made logical choices, there wouldn't be much of a story to tell. The Vanderling gang could make the rational choice to stick to legal means to make money, but if the whole game was similar to the nature of the first couple hours of the epilogue, I doubt many people would play it, and it wouldn't have the critical acclaim it holds. That being said, using these stories as thought experiments gives us ample opportunity to test ourselves on our decision-making prowess and allows us to fail in a safe environment where getting a game over only means needing to restart from the last save point. We also have the chance, through these narratives, to safely explore beliefs and ideas that we maybe can't explore in real life. We can see inside the mind of someone going through a traumatic experience, like the situation with Alice and Kara in Detroit Become Human, or Henry in Firewatch. These kind of games allow us to explore humanity at its darkest and most brutal from an observational angle where no real person is being harmed. If you've made it this far into the video, it's safe to assume that you're likely a critical thinker already, but in the event that you don't think of yourself as such, I feel it's important to lay out why we should even think about games beyond the surface level. You see, it's easy to just brush off any analytical stuff as overthinking. You might be inclined to argue that it's just a game. It's supposed to be a fun and interesting experience and not really much else. And to a point, I can understand this reasoning. After all, like I mentioned before, a lot of people play games mainly to unwind. Why should we bother thinking too much about them? Because humanity is complex and worth understanding, and taking the time to evaluate how you think and why you do the things you do will help you improve your life in every way. Using games, or even movies and books if that's more your style, is a great way to experience life from angles that would otherwise be impossible to see. Forcing yourself into someone else's shoes, not just using empathy, but actually living those experiences in a way, will give you a better understanding of the world and people around you, and will enrich your experience in whatever time you may get in this life. We should strive to improve the world wherever possible and maximize well-being for each and every person on the planet. Doing that starts with understanding the lived realities of others and subjecting our own views and opinions to the highest level of scrutiny we can manage. There's a lot more to say on the topic of philosophy in games, and a lot more games to dissect, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you want to learn more. Dropping a like on this video lets me know that you enjoyed it, and for those who want to help me continue making this kind of content, I've got channel memberships and a Patreon where you can get early access to videos, your name on the screen, and a lot more. For now, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.